Okay, so welcome to this webinar on activating and engaging students online. This is brought to you in collaboration between EdLab, the University Library, staff from the Language Centre and staff from the Faculty of Sciences and Engineering. So I'm Donna from EdLab and I'm going to be moderating today's session. So I'm just going to clarify a couple of technical things. So firstly, I hope everybody's got sound and can see and hear me. For those of you who didn't attend the webinar yesterday, this is a Zoom webinar rather than a Zoom meeting, so that might be new to a few of you. And in a Zoom webinar, as you can probably see, you don't actually, as a participant, see yourself, so you don't get a little video or a little image of yourself in the corner. And that's because we're expecting around 80 participants today, so it just keeps it a little bit more manageable. However, we would still really like you to engage with the speaker today and with the panelists that we've invited. And you can do that by using the little chat function that you can find at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So you can ask questions through the chat as you go along. But what we'll do is we'll just keep an eye on the questions that are coming in, and we'll actually address those at the end of the formal presentation rather than interrupting the speaker as we go along. What I should also say is that we also have the ability to switch on your audio as a participant. So if you have a question that you would rather state by audio or you want to follow up on the audio, then just let us know in the chat and I'll activate your audio so that you can do that as well. So today's speaker is Barend Last, and he's from the University Library. He's a blended learning specialist, and he's got extensive knowledge of innovative teaching methods and e-learning tools. I'm just going to let Barend say a quick hello so that you get to see him on screen.
Hello, hello.
Thank you. And today we've also got a panel of experts, and they're the speakers from all of the other webinars that we're offering this week, because you probably know that this is a series of webinars, and they're going to be helping out with a question and answer session that follows the presentation. So you can pose your questions to the speaker, to Barend, or you can pose the questions to any of the panelists. So I'll just give them a quick opportunity to say hello so that you get to see who everyone is as well. We'll start with Oscar.
Good morning, I'm Oscar van der Wijngaard. I'm with EdLab.
Good morning, I'm Christina Markinez-Tasakis. I work with the Language Center and I specialize in online learning and teaching innovation.
And my name is Stefan Jonge and I work at the Faculty of Science and Engineering as academic lecturer at the Maastricht Science Program and the coordinator of teacher professionalization at FSE. Welcome everyone.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So I'm assuming that everyone can hear and see everything. If you do have technical issues, then we advise you to log out and log back in again, just using the URL that was shared, or let us know in the chat if you have any issues. The session is also being recorded so that you can watch this later on the website. And with that, I'll now hand over to Barend.
Thank you, Donna. Everybody, welcome to this webinar on activating and engaging students online. Activating and engaging students helps them to better process information and thus optimizes learning. Like Donna said, my name is Barend Last. I work at the library as an educational consultant. And why the library, I hear you ask? Well, the library has an entire educational support department that can provide support on many topics. So we do more than just manage a huge collection of books. And therefore, it's my pleasure today to dive into the topic of how to do this, activating and engaging, especially in an online and blended setting. I hope to provide you with many concrete tips to utilize in your education coming next fall. And I know, of course, everybody is very busy, so am I, so I'm going to be as to the point and concise as I can be. So without further delay, let's dive in. Today's goals. I want to talk about the concept of blended learning, specifically because it's quite a vague concept somewhat. So what is it not? I will dive into the world of activating and engaging students, specifically in online teaching and learning activities. So you might know this term from constructive alignment. I will tell you a little bit more later. Then, of course, how to choose the right tool to support these teaching and learning activities. In my opinion, you should always start with the activity itself and then pick the tool that supports that. And I try to connect that a lot to the CCCS principles of problem-based learning. Of course, it's very important to differentiate between synchronous and asynchronous activities, so I will touch upon that as well. And we start with the Q&A, like Donna said. It's being recorded, so you can watch it back afterwards. So if you miss something, you can always take your time and watch it back. Now, instead of just telling you how to do it, I also want to show you how to do it. So today I will be using WooClap to get you guys activated and engaged as well. So to start off, I want to ask everyone to grab their smartphone out of their pockets, open up the browser, and navigate to this link, www.wooclap.com/activate. And when you go to that link, you will be immediately inside the WooClap app. You can also do this from the browser. Now, while you log in, I hear some of you think, oh, there you have it once more, another tool. Doesn't this take me out of the focus in this session? Well, I feel you. And I know it does take some time to set up. That's why normally when I do this with students during a course, I would always ask them to log in before class starts. After a while, 2 or 3 times, they know the drill, they know the link, use the same link every time, so they are already logged in when you start the activity. Now, the question I want to start with is summarize the online education in one emoticon. And the emoticons are the ones that you use in WhatsApp, right? The small little smileys. So send in one emoticon, how you feel about the past 3 months of online education. Let's see what this brings up. Craziness. I really like this one with the mouthpiece and the sweat drip on his forehead. Now you can already see that I am engaging with you guys while you're sitting at home. I'm not seeing your faces, but I do get a little bit of a vibe of how you're feeling, right? And how you felt about this part education. And this tool, specific tool that I'm using right now is the word cloud tool. And I really like this tool to start off my presentations because it already engages you. It makes sure that you already start up the tool because I will be using this tool later on as well. And I can use it, for instance, to activate pre-existing knowledge or to show related concepts. So thank you for sending this in. It gives a little bit of a cool overview, somewhat crazy, somewhat weird, people that are exploding heads. It was a very tough time. It was very difficult, mainly because we had to shift to online education in such a short time that we only had time for a quick fix. We can only do the formal part of education online, and it felt very distant, right? You don't see the students anymore. There's no more room for spontaneous interaction. So in an online environment, you have to explicitly facilitate this, and that requires you to approach your educational design differently. So get back to the fundamentals of what we'll be talking about today. Yesterday, my colleague Oscar van der Wijngaard from EdLab already addressed the underlying theoretical principles for course design. Especially here at Maastricht University, we use constructive alignment. It was a very inspiring webinar, so please do watch it back if you want to know more about it. But for today, it's just important to tell you that I will be focusing on the teaching and learning activities part. That means that the starting point for these activities are always your intended learning outcomes. And I will not address assessment explicitly and also not the intended learning outcomes. We will probably host another session about this separately later on, but I will show you some examples of assessment as well. Next to the constructive alignment principle, of course, there's a CCCS, philosophy of PBL education, constructive, collaborative, contextual, self-directed learning. And these principles already underline the need of activating and engaging teaching methods. So in today's talk, I'll try to link the tips and the tools to these principles as well. And if you want to know more about these principles, EdLab has some amazing videos, very informative about these concepts. So make sure to watch that. So without further delay, I'm going to dive into the topic at hand for today. And I want to start off with some question for you. This is the pyramid of learning. And I want you to send in the chat if you know this model. Just a yes or a no is enough. Let's see what comes in. Where's my chat? I can't see my chat. Ah, here. Okay, I see some yeses, I see some no's. This is the chat, yes, is this, yes, okay. So it's a no and it's a yes. Okay, I'm already engaging with you guys as well now. And I see somebody say, yes, I like it. Now, what basically this model says is there are retention rates, and the more participatory teaching methods you use, the higher the retention rate. Now, there is a fun fact about this learning pyramid because it's complete bullshit. Excuse my language. There is no real evidence that supports this model. It's made up beginning of the 20th century. And if you think about it, it doesn't make any real sense. I mean, if you are able to teach others about a topic, you have already learned it, right? So why do I show this to you? Well, first of all, to explain that there are many myths and misconceptions in and about education. And I will come back to that later in relation to the blended learning concept. But there's another reason why I showed you this. There is some common sense to the differences between passive and participatory teaching methods and learning. And this activating learning has been extensively researched. And evidence shows that by doing this, by activating and engaging students, might lead to better learning outcomes. So to show you a little bit of a correct, widely accepted theory for this, Bloom's taxonomy is often mentioned, as Oscar also addressed yesterday. And Bloom's taxonomy is a hierarchical ordering of cognitive skills that can help teachers to teach and students to learn. They are often used in creating intended learning outcomes, but also provide input for varying your teaching methods to activate and engage students. For example, when students have to apply knowledge, they first have to understand and remember that knowledge. So when looking for teaching methods on that level, the taxonomy could provide you with some guidance. Now, I think I've made clear that activating and engaging students is very important. However, in a physical environment, this is done differently than online in a blended environment. So let's look into that concept of blended learning a little bit more. But before I do, I want you to grab your smartphone again and answer the following question. What is, according to you, blended learning? Please send in one definition. You can also present likes on answers that other people send in. So we will get an overview of what you think blended learning is. So take 30 seconds to send in your definition. Yeah, I see the word mix pop up a lot. Could do it like this. This is a little bit better. Now, while you're sending in your answers, you can see again, I'm using WooClap to get your open-ended answers to an open-ended question. And you can see I can use several ways to present the results. I can even do a word cloud about it. And by asking you to provide likes on the answers, I already create like an order in the answers that I get. And this overview gives me a nice way to see what you feel the definition of blended learning is. Now, what I usually see in all these definitions is mainly there's a combination of things, right? There's a combination of online and physical learning. There's a combination of several methods. There's a combination of tools. And that is indeed true. There's always an aspect of combining online with face-to-face interactivity. One thing that I also often see is that it's somewhat defined from a teacher perspective. So they think of several ways of teaching, several methods of instruction, but the concept is called blended learning and not blended teaching. So instead of defining it from a teacher in the center, I prefer to define it from the student at the center. And this relates also to the problem-based learning concept, where we really place the student in the center. And ICT is then secondary. It's not so much about ICT has to be used in blended learning. It's an aspect of blended learning, but it's used to facilitate interaction with the students. So thank you for all sending these definitions in. And from here, I want to show you the definition that I think we should use here at Maastricht University, which is blended learning refers to enriched student-centered learning experiences, right? We're talking about learning and not about teaching. And the student is in the middle. And we make these learning experiences possible by integrating various strategies and making sure they are harmoniously aligned with each other. So combining them, mixing them, like you said in your definitions. And finally, we achieve this by combining face-to-face interaction with ICT. not just using ICT, but to facilitate that interaction. And from this definition, you can see, of course, the student-centeredness coming back. You see, of course, the online aspect, but I also urge you to not use this term too much, because basically you could place everything we've been doing for the past 20 years under the umbrella of blended learning. What I think is more important from this definition is that it's really about active learning. We want to engage and want to activate our students. And why is this problematic, right? This ambiguity of the concept. Well, it's because if it's so vague and there are so many definitions going around, it doesn't provide us with much guidance other than to tell you that you need to use activating teaching methods. But yeah, that's a good statement, but then what? I mean, you're all here because you want to know more about it. And these misconceptions around this concept can be problematic. For example, some people think that just using ICT, like using a digital whiteboard, right, in your classroom to write up things during your instruction, is also blended learning, which is not the case. There is no interaction taking place. It's just technology-enhanced instruction. So make sure you know what you're talking about, right? It's always about interaction using ICT or face-to-face and methods to activate the student. Now, before I really want to go into the tips and tricks and tools and methods to do this activating and engaging, I want to tell you what the difference is between asynchronous and synchronous learning. Synchronous learning refers to a learning event in which a group of participants is engaged in learning at the same time. And if synchronous learning takes place at the same time, asynchronous learning refers, of course, to the opposite. The instructor, the learner, and other participants are not engaged in the learning process at the same time. There is no real-time interaction with other people. And this divide is very important because different methods and tools can be applied for either. You can already see on this image I'm displaying here that, for example, asynchronous would be a discussion board, whereas synchronous would be a virtual classroom like we are doing right now. So I'm going to go over these two topics separately. But before I do that, I want to show you an example of a course to show you a little bit of how I approach course design from a student perspective. And also incorporating the CCCS principles. Using the intended learning outcomes as my starting point, I develop a student journey. And this student journey goes through several activities which are all aligned to one another and can take place either synchronously or asynchronously and can take place online or face-to-face. Now, let me go through this example real quick. You see the red line represents the student journey. And this is, of course, a really short example, but it's just to give you a little bit of an insight of how to do this. So before they come to class, they would, for example, acquire knowledge. They would read an article, prepare a short assignment. Then they would come to, for example, a lecture or a tutorial group where they have some discussion and collaboration. There can be some interactive assignments. After that, they go home and they get extra instruction online. They can do that if they need it, or maybe if they want to know more. And online, while they are at home, they can do some collaboration and practice. They review cases, they can do peer feedback in online tools. So there's a lot of interaction taking place outside of the classroom time, which is usually asynchronous. Then after that, they come back to a tutorial group. There's some more discussion, there's collaboration. Students can discuss the case, do some collaborative exercises. Then afterwards, they go back home again. There's some investigation discussion. They elaborate more on the case that they're working on with their group. They talk about it in an online forum. And in the end, they come back to a face-to-face tutorial group where they might present their case solutions and then give feedback to one another. Now, what you really see here is that there are several activities which are all aligned to each other. There are several tools being used because there's a peer feedback tool, there's an assignment in an online forum, there's extra instruction online, which all support these teaching methods. And of course, there are several methods of learning. There's collaboration, there's practice, there's discussion, there's investigation. So really varying in that as well. And there is a maximization of interaction, not just by the teacher and the student, but also between the students and between the student and the content. So using this approach, you can see several methods of activating and engaging students more in their entire course. Now I want to go through this synchronous learning first. I see there's a lot of, okay, yeah. Now, first of all, the synchronous methods and tools. Most of us, of course, are using conferencing tools like Zoom or Collaborate Ultra. And these tools have features to engage with students, like I just did in the chat with you guys. You can raise hands, you can provide polls, and you can do this by utilizing internal functions from Zoom, as example, annotation in real time. You could use the whiteboard where you can write on the screen. You can ask students to provide non-verbal feedback by asking them to raise the hand or say yes or no, or go slower, go faster. These are all ways to get feedback from the student. Now, this feedback part is really important. Any chance students have to learn to leave feedback is a great opportunity for interaction. And by making it more social, the feedback gets more meaning. So make sure to have all students turn their camera on when you have a session with them and address their names explicitly. Let everyone log in 10 minutes prior to starting so you can do some informal chatting. And another way to improve interaction is by inviting them then to contribute more. For example, instead of for explaining an article as a teacher, you can ask a group of students to study a specific article before class and let them present on this article in the beginning of the classroom session. And this is, of course, already a part of PBL education, but it might become more interesting when students are then specifically tasked with this. And then maybe task other students to evaluate the presentation and provide feedback. And you could do this by even giving them separate roles, like you're going to be the critical evaluator and you're going to give positive feedback. And by making this more explicit, you can provide more opportunities for feedback and ask students to contribute more to their interactive sessions. One other way to engage participants online is, of course, by using WooClap, like I've been doing with you guys now in this session. And you could do this by sharing your WooClap screen in Zoom, like I'm doing right now. I'm not using PowerPoint, I'm using WooClap. I've uploaded my PowerPoint slides into WooClap. And by doing that, I can place questions directly in between the slides. And I'm now presenting my browser screen to you guys, which allows me to instantly pose questions to you. And one great tool that I want to explain that WooClap offers, and then we'll experiment with that a little bit, is the Brainstorm tool. And I think this is a tool that really suits the PBL education very well, not just in doing an online session, also in a face-to-face session, where instead of using a whiteboard to write down everything, you can ask everybody to send in their brainstorm post-its, if you want to call it like that, in different categories. And you can easily switch around, play around with this, send in lights as well. So let's try this a little bit so you get a little bit of a feeling how this works. So I'm opening up the brainstorm. Grab your smartphone again. I want to ask you the question, what are the biggest challenges and what are the biggest opportunities you've seen in the past 3 months on learning about online education? And you can send these in by opening up your smartphone, going to the tool, and then selecting whether you want to send in a challenge or an opportunity. And then you can send in these via this tool. Remember, you can also send in likes. So if you see an answer that you really like, you just press the like button next to it, and then that will create automatically an order in the answers that I see, that we get on screen. So I see a little bit challenges like lack of focus, hard to engage with students. Yeah, I really get that. It is very difficult and challenging. We need to very explicitly facilitate that. But I also see some nice opportunities, trying out new approaches, learning to work with new tools, being creative. Now you see, by using this tool, I can brainstorm and I can have you all participate in the brainstorm. And for example, let's say I see an answer here that I like, but it's better suited in the challenges. I could, for example, easily drag and drop it to the challenges part, and then it will be on that side. I can easily delete one. I could also say, hey, I want to make this a little bit bigger. And I could also show it in a grid. Of course, all of these results are easily exportable into Excel. You can then post them on your learning management system afterwards. You could even use it as formative evaluation moments to provide feedback. So just to show you a little bit of this brainstorm tool in WooClap. And it's fairly easy. I mean, setting this up took me like 20 seconds, and all you need is a smartphone or a browser to log in. But like I said, always make sure that your participants are logged in at the beginning of the session, so you don't need to spend time during your session with logging in into the tool. And if not everybody is able to log in, that's not a big deal. Just let them work together, or let them just see the results. So thank you for sending this in. I'm not going to go in too deep into all your challenges and opportunities, but I see some really nice things. Of course, engaging students and students that are not engaged in an online environment is very challenging. So we really need to approach that differently. That's why I like that you see trying out new approaches. And that's probably why you're here, to learn about what these new approaches are. The other tool that I explained a little bit, I'm not going to do that with you now, but the one in the beginning with the emoticons, you can of course do that with words as well. And like I said, this is a really nice way at the start of any session to activate pre-existing knowledge. That's something that is very much connected to PBL learning, as the constructive learning really aims to build on pre-existing knowledge and scaffold that learning on and on. And at the beginning of a session, by using a word cloud tool like this, it can be done online, it can be done face-to-face as well, allows everybody to create their own associations with related concepts or activate their pre-existing knowledge. All right, so far the synchronous part, and of course you have many questions, and I'll answer them, try to answer them later on. But before I do, I want to tell you a little bit about asynchronous learning as well, because asynchronous learning is a bit different, so it really needs a different approach. But if you use the right methods and tools, you can really maximize interaction and engagement without making it too time-consuming for you as a teacher to set this up. And in this, the principles of PBL are really important. Maximize opportunities for collaboration, opportunities for self-directed learning, improve motivation by making assignments more contextual, and try to activate this pre-existing knowledge and scaffold your activities. And asynchronous active and engaging learning therefore means that students are given the opportunity to work independently to achieve the learning outcomes. And this can be done individually or in groups. And there are many ways that you can do this, all with their own advantages and disadvantages to engage students asynchronously. First of all, I think it's very important to build relationships. Be a visible and accessible teacher. Know your students by name and try to meet often. And I think this is something that Christina will touch upon tomorrow a little bit more when she's going to talk about the community of inquiry framework. So make sure to check out that presentation as well. And one great tip to achieve this, like I said, is to dedicate a part of your course specifically to introduce students and yourself to one another. And you can do this, for example, by letting them create profiles where they tell who they are, they tell you what their hobbies are, what they like. It's similar to what they would do on Facebook, on Instagram. And this is done fairly easy because in Canvas, the system that you're going to use from September, you can create pages, and then you can allow these pages to be editable by students. So for example, you create, let's say you have 20 students, you create 20 pages, provide the name in the page, and everybody in that page will create their own profile like they would do in a Facebook setting. And then you could create an assignment doing that where people might have to respond to that or something like that. And maybe also ask them to tell something about themselves in a video, because it's important for students to be able to present themselves in an online environment as real people. And again, Christina will tell you more about this tomorrow. Also use video when explaining a concept or an assignment or making an announcement. Instead of creating an announcement that you are all used to do in Blackboard in 10 lines of text, do it in a video. Grab your smartphone, record yourself, just very low key, and then put that in the announcement. Canvas has a really great app. It has a teacher app and a student app. If you download the teacher app, you can upload an announcement from the palm of your hand on your smartphone. Just record the video, upload it in the announcement, and you've already created more engagement because it's better if they see your face instead of reading the text. Try to facilitate collaborative learning as much as possible. Let students do group work and make it social by giving each group, each team, a place online to share. In Canvas, you can make use of the group sections, which is a little bit different than the sections part, and groups are created manually, and every group will have their own little Canvas part where they can share. They have discussion boards, they can create a wiki, they can create pages, and you can connect assignments to that. But always do this in real assignments and make sure to reflect on it as a teacher. Otherwise, students won't take it seriously. One of the many things I always hear is, yeah, I have this discussion board, I open it up and nobody places anything. Of course, nobody will place anything because you need to capture it in an assignment, ask a group of students to post a summary of an article, make sure other students in another assignment reflect on that, and make sure you also reflect on that as a teacher. And it doesn't need to be very big, but just show that you're visible and that you take it seriously. And then instead of replying to emails, you can say, I will post it on the discussion board, which saves you time because all the questions are on the discussion board and everybody can see it. So that saves you many emails. And finally, encourage peer evaluation. This is pretty easy to do by example using tools such as feedback fruits. And I will show you a little bit about that later, what this tool exactly is. Now, I've already said a little bit about Canvas. Canvas is our new system for learning management online. We are in the midst of a transition from Blackboard to Canvas. Personally, I am really happy about that. I know the timing is a little bit off as we have to switch to online and also to a new learning management system. However, I do feel that Canvas offers many options to really improve engagement with students. So I just want to address a few. First of all, there's within Canvas the quizzes function, and quizzes is a very nice tool to provide students with ways to test their own progress, and these are nice ways to use formative evaluation instead of only evaluating the students at the end of the course, already evaluating them during the course. And you could create like a small quiz 2 or 3 times in a course with automated feedback. And you can all do that before that the course starts, and then provide students, if they pick the wrong answer, with a tip. Hey, you might want to get back to this or that article, read a little bit more about that, and redirect their own progress. So that makes it more self-directed, and also you have a little bit of an overview of where the students stand, because everybody has to do this quiz. It's mandatory before Sunday evening, and then on Monday you can see what the students did, how they scored, and maybe you have to give some more attention to several of these topics. So it works 2 ways. It provides the students with information about their progress, and it provides the teacher with information about the course and how to adapt that to the needs of the students. The second part is working with blogs. This is a fairly simple assignment you can provide for students, asking them to write a blog weekly, bi-weekly, whatever you want, in which they reflect in like maybe 500 words on their own progress. It doesn't need to be in a portfolio, just a blog like you would do on any website. And this works 2 ways. Again, you can also do it as a teacher to tell a little bit about the progress of the course in general. In an online environment, this is more important to explicitly facilitate, because there's no more spontaneous interactions that would take place on the campus. And instead of blogging in text, of course, you can also use video again, doing it in a vlog kind of style. Discussions, I already touched upon that a little bit. Canvas has a really nice discussion board, which you can also capture in an assignment. And then in that assignment, students will get an inbox how to say that, they get an assignment in their inbox and they know what they have to do in that discussion board, and then you can easily grade it because in Canvas the discussion board is linked to the grading tool. So that makes it very easy for you to capture discussions in assignments. And finally, what I think really makes Canvas stands out from other systems is that it's very adaptive. You can, if you use a very good approach to your structure of the course, you can work with prerequisites, you can work with mastery paths in which you create several paths in your course that students can go through. For example, you have an entrance quiz, and if you score 60%, you will go to this module. If you score 80%, you will go to that module. And if you score 100%, you will go to that module. And the first module could be remedial. The final module could be more in-depth. And so you can create several paths within your course, creating more self-directedness and more adaptiveness inside your course. Of course, this requires you to really think a little bit more about your education. So I get if you don't have the time for now, but just know that this is possible and that Canvas makes this quite easy to set up. Now, I said a little bit just now about Feedback Fruits. Feedback Fruits is a plugin for Canvas. It was already available inside Blackboard, and Feedback Fruits really tries to create more interaction and more options for feedback. So for example, it has an interactive document tool, and in this interactive document tool, you could, in an assignment, provide students with an article or a video or an audio file before they get to class, and then they read that article, watch that video, listen to that audio inside the tool, and they have to annotate inside the tool and answer questions that you provide and annotate the difficult parts. And then you as a teacher can already get insight into the study process of the students, and there's already interaction between the students during the study process. And of course, I'm not saying you have to put all your articles in this tool, but just know that this is a way to get insight and monitor the study process already before the students come to class. Because I hear often that you, for example, when you would do a lecture or a presentation, the students come and you hope that they've prepared, but you have no idea, right? Now, well, by using a tool like that, you can make sure that they are, or at least you know who isn't. Another tool that Feedback Fruits provides is the peer evaluation tool and also the group member evaluation tool. This is a peer feedback module in which you can either have peers assess each other on a product or assess each other on their competencies. Of course, the competencies is something that is very important in PBL education because we have a lot of discussion groups where people have different roles and different competencies are very important. There's been some issues regarding free roaming, right? Students that don't do anything, but they can go with the rest of the group because they go pretty fast. By using a tool to assess each other anonymously, online, automated in a tool like that, you can gain insight in that as well and provide opportunities for more feedback. And Feedback Fruits works with Canvas, so you can, from creating an assignment within Canvas, just click on the Feedback Fruits tool and start working with that as well. I'm finally almost at the end of my talk. One few tips I want to give you is that we've created at the library a tool, because I often get asked, how do we find all these tools that we have, and how can we do this starting from our teaching and not from the tool? So we thought at the library, Stefan and me actually started this design process. We created a tool wheel, and in this tool wheel you can click on what you want to do with your students: collaborate, discuss, practice, produce, investigate, or acquire knowledge. And then when you click on one of these elements, it zooms in on this part of the pie and provides you with an overview of all the tools that are available that we have in license at the University of Maastricht, and also connect them to inspiring teaching methods that can be done either face-to-face or online. So make sure to check this out. The link will be provided in the with the video afterwards, and also on the online education portal at Maastricht University. There is a tile specifically for this tool wheel. And we've also created a student version, which is a little bit toned down, but it provides students also with information on the tools that they can use for their education and their assignments. Now, in online and blended learning, a large part of the informal social activities that the physical campus normally implicitly facilitates no longer happen spontaneously. Therefore, we must facilitate that more explicitly. And if we do that correctly, that can hugely affect the student engagement. One model that Christina will touch upon tomorrow, really more in depth, is the community of inquiry model. But just to give you a heads up, it's all about creating presence in an online learning environment. And I think that present is already closely related to my talk as well, because I've talked about creating online profiles, using video, making it more contextual. And I think that this presence in an online course is understood as the ability of people to project their personal characteristics into the community and thereby presenting themselves as real people. And this is, I think, for creating engagement and activating education online, very important. And this works on social, cognitive, and teaching presence. And tomorrow, again, Christina will touch upon that more. I think that is my talk for now. Yeah, let's open up the questions, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much, Barend. It was, I think your presentation was an excellent way of leading by example, because you provided plenty of opportunity for interaction. And I know I'm teaching in period 1, and I feel excited to try out new things. I think I'll start with one of the questions is, I think a lot of people in period 1, we know that we're going to be running tutorials offline, face-to-face. But with the lectures, a lot of people have been told, deliver the lectures online. Well, then they have the choice. Do they want to do that synchronously? Do they want to do that asynchronously? What are the advantages and disadvantages? And is there an ideal mix? How much should be synchronous and how much should be asynchronous? Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, my specific advice. Now, let me put it differently. I think it should be aimed at providing as much interaction as you can. So interaction is the when you see each other, you should be interacting with each other. So that means that instruction can be done asynchronously. So whenever you're explaining a concept, and of course, in interaction, you could also explain something, but I mean, like the instruction that you know you're going to have to give beforehand, I would say capture that in a video or capture that in a text and put that online and let them do that asynchronously, and then spend all the time that you have with each other for feedback and questions. And maximizing the options for interactivity. So synchronously interactivity and asynchronously instruction.
Could I add to that? Because this was my own particular area of research. My own research dissertation was about the way students interact synchronously and asynchronously. And what I discovered was an asynchronous interaction. Students took more time to think about their responses to questions, and therefore there was a greater formality in the way they expressed themselves. So this can be used perhaps a little bit more for scaffolded and more formal kind of responses that might be required in relation to tasks and assignments. Whereas the asynchronous interaction was a little bit more, there was a kind of fine line between the social and chatting and also the academic. And so, you know, it seemed to me when I studied transcripts of student interaction, it seemed to go into the personal, then back into the academic. And that also had its place because it engaged students and engaged, you know, it brought together students and instructors. So I suppose what I would suggest is if you'd like something a little bit more formal and, you know, something that can be later used and developed, asynchronous might be a good way to pose a question to students, and synchronous might be a good way to make sure they're there and present with you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think leading on from that, also if you're going to offer information asynchronously, we don't mean, oh, just pre-record your 2-hour lecture just talking at the screen, because it's very difficult to engage students for a long time. It's very tiring. And I think this also relates to some of the questions that have come in on the chat, where people have said, okay, they want to do things online, but instead of, if you can't give a 2-hour tutorial or a 2-hour lecture anymore, and you have to shrink that down, then how do you get the same amount of information across? Because of course we don't want to halve the length or the information that we normally deliver in our courses. So I think it is about engaging the students in those synchronous and asynchronous methods, but also giving the students opportunity for self-study in between. Are there any more views on this that you'd like to add?
Well, you know, the approaching interaction, often I see is that we tend to think too much of interaction with me as a teacher with the student, but there's also interaction between students and interaction of the student with the content. And those are also moments where they can get feedback from peers, from the content, from the assignment itself. So I think when approaching what you did physically to an online setting, it won't work if you copy paste that into the online setting. We need in an online setting to create more of these opportunities for interaction with peer-to-peer and peer-to-content, which implicitly already took place in a physical setting, but now not anymore in an online setting. And that means that, like you said, we have to cut down 2-hour lectures because it's just too long for an online setting. And then maybe approach it differently. Go back to what you want to learn, strip down your lecture from all the examples and create only the knowledge clips where you really explain a concept, and then use the interaction to discuss the examples, right? So it's not just by taking what you have and doing something with that, going back to your learning outcomes, and then create a new set of activities for an online setting. So changing that.
Yeah, and I think feedback fruits that you mentioned is an excellent way of doing that as well, to encourage that peer interaction. And normally we think of feedback fruits as, you know, uploading maybe a student presentation and then getting peers to review that. But actually you could upload your own knowledge clip and get the students to have a discussion around that knowledge clip. So it doesn't have to be something that they're necessarily peer reviewing. But yeah, of course, if you want to engage students better in peer activities, then they also have to get to know each other well. And I know that's a topic that Stefan will also discuss in his session on group dynamics. Yep. But there were a few questions on that that came up on how do you break the ice. So I don't know, Stefan, if you want to say a couple of words now.
Maybe just a few words, but of course check out the webinar on Thursday on that. But indeed, a first tutorial session or a first group setting, and then breaking the ice with multiple opportunities, which is actually similar than in an on-site tutorial, in which you get to know the other ones, and building trust not only between you and the students, but also between students is, I think, very, very important in both online and on-site setting.
Yeah, I see a question from Anne van den Bulk about, are asynchronous activities mostly online? No, I don't think so. I think asynchronous activities can be online, but also offline. I mean, if somebody is studying and then writing a feedback on somebody else's work can be done offline, right? But online provides us with opportunities to facilitate the interaction better than it does physically. So I hope that answers that question a little bit. And I want to tell one thing. Oh yeah, I saw a couple of questions which are about the setting where half of the tutorial group is present physically and the other half is present on distance. And this is first of all, not a way of blended learning. I really want to make that explicitly known, because there is no following up of activities for the students. There is only two different students. There's one part that's doing online education, one part doing physical education. And if you want to do this, I saw one question is about which tool to use and how to try to engage, and how difficult that is on the two groups. It's very difficult because you have to use two different modalities at the same time, which requires you to constantly switch between the ones that are on distance and the ones that are physically present. That's why at KU Leuven, where they have experimented with this for the past couple of years, built a huge setup with screens that allow all participants that call in from distance to be viewed as large as the real participants are. And that makes them more physically present in the room. But that, of course, requires a huge technical setup and a lot of training for the teacher to be constantly aware of switching between them. And even in that setup, it turns out to be very difficult to keep everybody engaged. So there's no tool that I can say, use this tool and your virtual classroom will work very well. It is very difficult, and it will definitely prove a well, not definitely, but it might result in frustration if you only use a couple of laptops and place them at the back of the room. And I think, Stefan, maybe you can address on the pilot that you run a little bit on that as well.
Yeah, so that was indeed the hybrid model that we tested with half of the students being present on site and the rest being online. And actually, we did that with very motivated participants. And even though it worked out okay-ish, the cognitive load, how brain draining it was, both for the on-site and online participants, plus also for the tutor. Actually, when we did that pilot, we really advised not to use that model, only in case of using a hybrid model in which 80% of students is on-site available, and maybe 20% who are really not able to come to Maastricht, for example, to do that on-site. And then if that is the model that you choose, really assign tasks to these students. So give them the task as the discussion leader or the scribe, or have multiple scribes, because then they will feel more included to be part of the group process. Else they, what we also practice is if they have no rules, they really feel excluded because they are not physically present. But of course, there are also other models which you might choose, but always check with the faculty what the opportunities are. But for example, you could also cut your tutorial into 2 groups. So if you have a 2-hour tutorial, use 1 hour for an on-site only smaller group and 1 for online. And then make sure, of course, that they get the information from the other group. So for example, then you could use a discussion forum on Canvas to share information so that you really are able to meet the intended learning outcomes of your course.
Yeah, and I think if you do want to attempt a hybrid version, then as Stefan said, it's a cognitive overload, but it takes a lot of preparation. So it is really important to have the opportunity to practice and prepare, like getting yourself and the students in the right place where everybody can be seen on screen and that sort of thing. And quite a few of the questions that came in during the presentation talked about how much preparation will all this take and how much time will it all take. And I think that really varies depending on your experience and the kind of tools that you want to use. But as Oscar talked about yesterday, it also needs to, you can't just be like, let's just throw this tool in. It has to be part of your overall course design. Yeah, I think, Oscar, do you want to pick up on that a little bit?
Yes, although I also saw, and I think it's related, I saw another question in the chat that I also sort of made a lot of sense to me as well, and that I would have had and maybe still have. So Barend, you've shown all these engaging activities that really seem to sort of, where you can easily imagine that it works. But there was this question saying, well, okay, doesn't that take up too much time and too much time away that would usually be used for just sort of sharing the information and the knowledge? So sort of Hans Essers asked sort of, within the allotted time, will there still be enough time to go through all the course information, which I think should then potentially be linked to the intended learning outcomes of the course, for instance? Why, when you're engaging students in all these different ways?
Isn't it the same thing? I mean, it's not, we have students go through the information and we have all these activities. Isn't that the same thing? So, by using these activities, they are going through the course information and the content, right? And of course, the information overload, the cognitive load shouldn't be too high. But I've seen some course evaluations, and the students don't spend the time that is set for the course on average that they could be using. So I think these opportunities for interaction really help create more and better room for learning. And I'm not saying use all of my tips, right? I'm saying use the tips that you think suit your intended learning outcomes the right way, and look for the ways to maximize those opportunities for interaction without making a huge work on your own end for the teacher on preparation and also on the student's end. So the student, I mean, when I was a student, I'm going to sit with fellow peers and study the materials anyway. Right? I did that almost on a daily basis. But instead of us doing it ourselves, the teacher is asking us to do it in an assignment. So it's not the one or the other, it integrates.
Yeah. And I also think, again, it stresses the need to really reflect, as we talked about yesterday, on what is it that I want my students to learn in this course and what gets them to that point. And I think that is really where you open up opportunities to see, okay, it's not just me instructing them that gets them to that point, but they may still get there in other ways, which doesn't mean that I don't play a role in this, in structuring those pathways. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And well, there are lots of affordances. When I did my master's via distance learning, and I didn't miss, I mean, it was so interactive that I felt I might as well have been in the same room as many of my classmates who were spread all across the globe in every time zone. I put together a PowerPoint. Not, it wasn't a PowerPoint, it was on Google Slides, but nonetheless, there are lots of tools and apps which enable people to interact. We may as well have been in the same room, and we could do things that actually we couldn't have done together had we even been in the same room together, because you can't really necessarily add to the same document. This is only something you can do if everyone's logged into into the same program. So there are a great number of affordances which might not even be possible if you were sitting together in a classroom, and they can be taken advantage of. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One final question, I think, before we have to end, is from Frank. How can we motivate our lecturers to use all these nice and fancy tools? Tried that before, but encountered quite some resistance. I can imagine there, but then again, I ask you the same question back to you. Don't we always have people that will resist to what they're doing? When I gave lectures, traditionally, there are students that won't like it. And when I use WooClap, there's going to be participants today that don't like WooClap. Well, I'm always going to have that. But I think with that, I'm just not going to give that enough attention. I'm just going to use it. And at some point, they're going to be used to it and they're going to be using it. And I use slight tricks to make it easier. So for example, like I said, I'm going to ask everybody to log in before I start my lecture. So everybody is already ready to set this up. So it won't take me 2 or 3 minutes for everybody to log in, and then after 2 or 3 times, they get used to it and they know, we're going to have a lecture from Barend. I know I have to set up my WooClap. I'm already grabbing my phone and starting doing that in the lecture. Yeah.
And maybe in addition to that, I think also what helped for me and also to inspire other colleagues is also to provide some evidence for that. So for example, having lectures, if we keep on posting these 2-hour lectures, we know that our attention span is maximum 20 minutes, if not lower, for students. So, and there is a lot of research done about that, and showing that kind of research and making evidence-informed decisions about how we design our education might also help to get some colleagues using these kind of tools.
Thank you. So there are last few questions about tools that are available and extra support. So the library have plenty of extra information on creating videos for your education. And then there's also the tool wheel so that you're able to see what we have licenses for and what the university recommend for you to use. Also, don't forget that within your faculties and your departments, they'll also be providing guidelines for next year. So I know people are asking, will the tutorials be online or offline, and lectures online and offline? So please check within your departments what the recommendations are as well. And otherwise, happy experimenting, because it is a lot of fun trying out these new things. And yeah, there are still 2 more webinars to go, and there's still opportunity to sign up. So hopefully we'll see you later this week. Thank you to all of the speakers today and the panelists, and thank you very much for participating as well. Okay, bye.
Bye everyone.
Thanks everybody. Bye. See you tomorrow.